Hello everyone, welcome and Happy New Year. We are looking at another Adam Neely video today. He talks about this song Castaways, so let's dive right on in and see what he has to say. I'm Dr. Zach, grab a cup of tea and join me. Alright, so the title of the video is Why Castaways is a Masterpiece in Songwriting. So let's see what he has to say to prove this point. He has this kind of intro, which he talks a little bit about the song. He talks about how it became popular in this section called Why Is This Meme a Thing? So we're going to go ahead and start right in his analysis about 3 minutes in the video.
Is in the key of F major. It follows an ABA form where the A section has 3 unit motifs, little nuggets of melodic information with an associated.
Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here to just explain a little bit more about these motifs because he doesn't go quite into this much detail. So I agree that there are 3 kind of main ideas or little tiny musical ideas which are called motifs in this work. So we have this Castaways here, right? And it comes back, and in total we see it 5 times, right? Those are the 5 kind of blue ideas that he's marked out. What he never talks about though is the lead-in. So we start with no lead-in, right? Just right on Castaways. And then with We Are Castaways, we have this C to B, okay, coming down. And then when we have it again here, we have a leap up to C, we are, and then castaways. It stays on that C and jumps down. So this C here is a different note, right? We have a little bit of variation there. And then when we come back to it in measure 13, we have it just kind of the regular way that it's written in measure 1. And then at the very end, we have this jump up A to C before coming down. So this A to C kind of lead-in happens the 3rd time we get the Castaways motive, right? So it's kind of combining these 2 ideas. We have this descending Castaways thing, and instead of then having some more descending ideas, we have the ascending lead-in instead.
Unit motifs, little nuggets of melodic information with an associated lyric, which are all strung together to create the melody. The first motif, the Castaways motif, is based on a descending syncopated D minor triad, harmonized with an F major 7 chord, the 1 chord, the tonic.
Castaways, we are castaways.
This earworm of a motif instantly has a vibe because we keep hitting the 6th note of the scale. In the key of F, that's the note D. Now in European classical music, generally the 6th note wants to resolve down to the 5th note, like this. Amen. But in jazz...
Okay, so right there, he mentioned generally, which is good. He didn't say that it was a hard and fast rule, but the cadence he played was what's called a plagal cadence, where you go from the 4 chord to the 1 chord. Happens at the end of every hymn where they have this kind of amen figure, which is why he said that. It's not like he said a hard and fast rule. So he is kind of generalizing here. And I just wanted to point that out for something that happens later in the video, that in this case, he is generalizing what happens. And this is definitely not a hard and fast rule.
Jazz and bossa nova music, you don't need to do that with the 6th note of the scale. You can kind of just let it hang there ambiently in the air. And when you do that, you get a melody which really accentuates the bossa nova vibe. The melody keeps hammering on that 6 more with the next motif, the ahoy motif, which is...
Okay, before we get into this motif, he has a good point here about that 6th note, because in traditional classical music, scale degree 6 doesn't belong to like a tonic or a dominant chord, which are the 2 kind of pillars of Western tonal harmony. So that 6th note does kind of give you that little bit of a different character. Really what we're kind of hearing is it's like an add 6, what we call kind of add 6 to chords nowadays, where you get that kind of a feel to it. So much more common in kind of popular harmony, jazz harmony, this type of thing, right? So not exclusive to bossa nova, but definitely something that can give a different kind of flavor than what you hear with traditional classical music.
Ascends. Ahoy, ahoy there. This then comes back around to the Castaways motif, which descends. Castaways.
Ahoy there, ahoy, we are castaways.
Okay, so he kind of mentions this here, but he doesn't give enough emphasis, I think, to the ascending versus descending. And this even goes to strengthen my point about why these lead-ins, the we are, is important, because when we have this initial descending castaways, we have a lead-in that is also descending. And then when we get the second idea, now it's ascending. So now we have contrast, right? We have an ascending idea and a descending idea. And the lead-in, again, ascends, right? So in the descending part, the lead-in descends, and in the ascending part, the lead-in ascends. So it's an important thing that he just kind of almost mentions in passing.
So far, we've only had one chord, the one chord. This is our point of rest. This is our tonic chord. But now the harmony becomes a little bit more active. We get an F sharp diminished 7th chord, a sharp 1 diminished, which then goes to a G minor 7 chord, the 2 minor 7 chord, followed by a C7 chord.
Okay, so sharp 1 diminished 7th doesn't actually exist. This has some problems with it, so let's break it down. What's happening here is we have a fully diminished 7th chord. That's what this little circle means. This means fully diminished 7th. Now, fully diminished 7th chords and dominant 7th chords, or the 5-7 chord, right, both have a dominant function, which means that they tend to go to 1, all right, tend to go back to our tonic. So what we have here is what's called a secondary dominant. As in, it is a dominant that we're borrowing from another key. So it is kind of a secondary key that we're borrowing it from. So it's called a secondary dominant. F sharp is a secondary dominant of G. Okay, specifically this F sharp fully diminished we would find most often in G minor because of how the accidentals are in G minor. So this is not a sharp 1 diminished 7th. It's actually a 7 fully diminished 7th of G, which in this key is 2, right? Which then resolves to a 2 minor 7, which then resolves to 5-7. So the label is incorrect. And also he uses Roman numerals in his analysis here, but as far as like what Roman numerals mean, they're supposed to indicate function. That's what they were kind of invented for, was to show you the function of how something is, how a chord progression functions, right? And a lot, I feel like, of his analyses don't really take that into account, because like a sharp 1 going to 2 doesn't make any sense. Later on, it oscillates between 2 chords, and so he keeps putting the Roman numerals there, even though since it's oscillating, those harmonies aren't functional. They aren't helping to push the harmony into like a certain direction or anything. They're just kind of stagnant on those 2 chords. So Roman numerals are supposed to indicate function. That's their purpose. And just using them anytime for a chord doesn't really kind of realize them to their full potential, and also doesn't really service us as kind of analysts to uncover any sort of deeper structure or kind of meaning of the piece, because just using them willy-nilly like this doesn't give us any more information, right? It's not using them for what their intended purpose was.
Chord, the 5-7 chord, 2, 5. Progressions which go from the 2nd chord of the key to the 5th chord of the key, these 2-5 progressions, are extremely important in jazz and bossa nova harmony. Without them, you wouldn't get that immaculate flavor of bossa nova music. They help give expectations of resolution. The third motif that we get has this large melodic leap. We go up a minor 7th from this D all the way up to a C, and then resolve down to an A. The harmony is just oscillating back and forth between this G minor 7 and the C.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. The Roman numerals here are superfluous because we aren't actually moving anywhere. We're just kind of stagnant on these 2 chords, so they aren't really serving as a functional harmony. So the other thing that he didn't mention here is that this third motive is a combination of the first 2. Remember, the main difference between the first 2, I'd say, are the direction. So Castaways descends, the Ahoy ascends, and here we have both. We have an ascent with ba-da-dum, and then a descent, da-dum. So this motive actually combines those two directional qualities of the first two motives. And then when we get this plain Castaways, there's no lead into this one, right? It's actually under a different harmony. It's under this G minor 7 instead of an F minor 7. So we don't actually hear Castaways repeated exactly with the same harmony at all. Okay, so we have the initial Castaways, then the lead-in descends for the next one. And then on the next one, the lead-in ascends, right? Following the motive that ascends. And then when we get it back again as a regular presentation, it's under a different harmony. So that's a change. Not to mention we get the ahoy here, which is literally combining the first and second motive. Like I said, the third motive is kind of a combination of the directions. Now we get a literal kind of mashup of the first and second motive. And then when we get this Castaways going down again, the last time we had an ascending lead-in with the A to C, we stayed on the C for cast and then went back down to the pitches we'd expect for aways. But instead now here, we don't stay on that C, we go back down to the A. So there is never an exact repetition of this motive. He doesn't mention this, but I think it's really significant because you hear repetition so often in music. Especially in popular music, it's oftentimes exact repetitions. But what makes this song, I think, kind of more of this masterpiece in songwriting that he has in his title, is that the composer never exactly repeated the main idea. He changes it using that lead-in, and he correlates the lead-in to whatever the motive is doing before it, right? The motive's descending, the lead-in descends, vice versa. When we get this exact repetition of the lead-in, we are, instead of castaways, he goes, we are castaways. So even that little bit is different. Everything is just a little bit different, even though it's all the same in a way, right? It's all very recognizable as far as like the pitch and the rhythm. That all kind of stays consistent, right? But the little other details are what's making this so interesting. Okay, so in this section, he talks about how Castaways has some influence from other songs. The composer kind of drew some influences, which is really common and normal. So let's go ahead now and look at this B section and what he has to say about the next part of the song.
When we get to the bridge of Castaways, we're going to change keys several times, which is going to make us feel like we're going on a journey, and that's going to be reflecting in the lyrics. We're going to feel the thought of a journey. The specific way we're going to change keys is through a melodic sequence. We're going to take the same melody and just kind of like move it around up and down to different keys. This technique was very common actually in bossa nova music. I talked a lot about this in my video on The Girl from Ipanema, which is the most famous bossa nova, which has a bridge that changes keys in a very similar way to Castaways. We first modulate to the key of C major with a 2/5 progression, a key that's not too terrible.
Okay, so we're in a new key now. And as mentioned in the comments, which I thought was really cool, the comments of this video, someone mentioned that it says we were out at C and we're now actually landing in a C major key area. So the combination of like tying those two together is pretty cool. We have G and C chords here, right? Which we had that oscillation between G and C chords, although now the quality of the chords are different because they are functioning in a different key, right? So this would be what I would say like an appropriate use of Roman numerals. Okay, so yeah, because we have a 2 going to a 5 going to a 1. So we have this predominant, right? Something that comes before the dominant, going to a dominant, going to the tonic. This is what I mean by functional harmony, right? This is the framework that this was all developed in. And so like Roman numerals, to be like the clearest explanation that you can be, you should only be using these Roman numerals in kind of functional contexts. Otherwise, they don't really mean anything. You might as well just use the chord symbols because that's all you're doing is just labeling what the chord is in that key. You're not really explaining the function at all. But in this case, like you can see the clear kind of functional progression.
Terribly far from where we started in F major. This key change makes us feel like we're going to a new place, like we're going on a journey. And the lyric, "We were out at sea," confirms that musical feeling. This melodic phrase repeats again, this time down a whole step in the key of B flat major.
The rain began to rain and the wind began to whip.
The melodic sequence breaks on the phrase, "We felt our ship."
Okay, so I don't know why he just stops there. I mean, he accomplished his point. He said there's a melodic sequence. He showed you the sequence. That's nice. I want to go a step further and say that the reason this works so well is because, look, we end with the C major 7 in the first line. And then the second line here, it's a C minor 7. So that C harmony, right, carries through. All we've done is just kind of like slide a couple of notes down a half step. And now we're in our next little key area. So it's really smooth, right? And that comes across when you listen to this. It feels like a really smooth connection. When we usually see this kind of just step modulation, it actually goes the other way. You think like Under the Sea is what kind of comes to mind. Right? It just kind of like chunks it up to the next key. I've also heard this called as like a trucker modulation because it happens in a lot of country songs. But instead of going up, we're going down. And I think what really facilitates this really smooth kind of sequence is the fact that we have the C major 7 at the end and then going into a C minor 7. That kind of tie-in helps make it sound really smooth and continuous.
Began to rain and the wind began to whip.
The melodic sequence breaks on the phrase, "We felt our ship tip." And on that scary moment of feeling the ship tip over, we get a 2/5, now in a minor key. Ooh, dark.
Okay, so see, this is kind of the interesting part. You can see the 2-5-1s and all the different keys. Like I said, that's where the functional Roman numerals really kind of help you identify these things. Now, the one thing that he doesn't mention is all of these extra kind of color notes that are added. We have a flat 5, we have a sharp 9. That introduces a lot of dissonance and like what is traditionally seen as very like tense, right? A lot of tension in these chords. But all he says is that it goes to A minor, which is the scary bit. I would say that it's more than just going to a minor key. We have these kind of additional flat 5s and sharp 9s that sets up, right, this arrival in the minor key that makes it sound scary. So there's more than just the key area that contributes to this feeling.
We felt our ship tip, it was going down.
Now in the lyric "going down," we have this nice chromatic bass motion. The chord stays A minor, but the bass goes A, G sharp, G. It goes down, very much like the Backyardigans ship does. A, G sharp, G. Oh no, the ship is taking on water. How much more chromatic bass motion can it handle? Goofy. It's a pretty literal.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. But again, this is what's called text painting or like word painting. You're using the lyrics to inform what the music does. And when I listened to the actual song, I think I heard the treble, like there's a piano that's in the background, and the treble voice also does a little descending thing. So there's multiple layers of that kind of descending idea being enforced, which is, like I said, it's a really common thing that has been in use since the Renaissance era, is this kind of text painting. So but it's still a nice technique, right?
Example of the music imitating the lyrics, like this descending bass line, a descending ship. But if we're going to feel this thought of the ship going down, a descending bass line is a great way to do that. Now, you might not necessarily have noticed this bass line when you first listened to Castaways, but your brain did. And children's brains have the habit of soaking this kind of context up.
Okay, right there. I wish he had some sort of source, like anecdote, like from my own personal experience, I would agree with that. Just like subconsciously, people kind of pick this thing up. The age of the child would be what I would kind of call into question there, since one of the primary goals of like a kindergarten general music education is learning the difference between high and low. Like if you're still in that stage, how would you know that something's descending, right? What it could be doing though is starting to kind of teach you these stereotypes that, oh, something's going down, and you hear the music go down, like subconsciously, you might be starting to build those connections. But again, that's just like from my own experience and just kind of speculation of that's what's happened. And I think this is definitely speculation on his part. It doesn't sound like he has a source for this, that children just seem to soak up this type of thing. It's just something that he has experienced himself. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that comes from, but like I also kind of get it. I agree with him, even though I don't have a source for it. So maybe there's something there.
We experience their storytelling through musical storytelling. The bridge tells the story of the past, and the A section tells the story of the present. The bridge section ends by cycling through the cycle of fifths with dominant seventh chords. D7, G7, C.
Okay, so again, really common kind of harmonic sequence. So he mentioned the melodic sequence, but he's not calling this a harmonic sequence for some reason. And if we look here, the A minor, which then with the G and the bass would make it kind of like an A minor 7, is a 5 of D. Now it's not a dominant 5, which is what we get over here, but it does have that kind of fifth relationship. So it does help us lead into this kind of sequence by setting up that first motion of a fifth and then going into the chain of kind of dominant seventh chords, which then gets us back into F major, like he explains in a second.
E7, which sets up our return to the A section.
So we launched our lifeboat so we wouldn't drown.
It's really not that surprising if you think about it, that this song had a moment of viral resurgence this year.
Okay, so we're getting into his big kind of thesis statement. He seems to like to make these grandiose statements that have a lot, like they're really densely packed. So let's go ahead and break down what he has to say here. Maybe we might listen to the whole thing first, and then we'll come back and take it apart.
A platform that was designed to remix and reuse bits of cultural detritus as sweet, dopamine-giving, nostalgia-drenched content. Especially after a year which didn't seem to make any sense. Things didn't really seem to happen for a reason. And Castaways, the song, might for some people remind them of a time where things did happen for reasons. Things were safe. Castaways acts as an anesthetizing agent to ward off the trauma of a year that was lost. Kind of like the Backyardigans ship.
Wow, that was certainly a string of words, wasn't it? Okay, so what I have thought about what he has to say here, and I think in general, his point is that this song reminds that Gen Z population, which TikTok is really popular with Gen Z. This is something that Gen Z grew up with, right? So it reminds that population of a simpler time, right? When they were younger, they had that nostalgia. Nostalgia is like a really powerful emotion, and it kind of can elicit, really positive memories and things. And so that's why this song really took off, because it resonated so much with Gen Z, and there are a lot of Gen Z users on TikTok. That's kind of what I got from it. Now, remember earlier when I said like he was generalizing how the 6 resolves to 5? I'd say that everything he's given in this video is pretty plain, like straightforward information. You don't have to know how to read music to enjoy the video, because there are also some like entertaining aspects of this, these kind of like in-between sections where he explains the meme, where he says that's probably borrowed from somewhere else, right? He has a live performance of the piece. Like that can make this video enjoyable without really having to have the ability to read music or understand chord symbols or Roman numerals, etc. But there is some of that, right? I mean, he does include it. So if you do understand these things, that might give you a little bit deeper insight into this video, maybe a little deeper appreciation even. However, even though he's given this kind of straightforward presentation of all these theory stuff, he ends with this really kind of convoluted, densely packed, like obscure vocabulary, in my opinion, for like just a regular viewer, thesis at the end. So I don't know why he kind of like cranks the complexity to 11 for his statement about this, basically what the whole video is supposed to be about. So I tried summing up what he meant, and I think the hilarious part is what he means doesn't actually correlate to the title of this video. The title says, "Why Castaways is a masterpiece in songwriting." Now he gives us some like analysis which can help explain why the piece is so well crafted. But then when he gives his thesis statement, it's all about why the piece was successful on TikTok, right? It's because it resonates with the Gen Z population. But that doesn't tell us anything about why Castaways is a masterpiece. So I think there's just really not a whole lot of kind of coherency as far as what this topic is about in the video. So let's go ahead now and kind of break down what he has to say.
It's really not that surprising if you think about it, that this song had a moment of viral resurgence this year on a platform that was designed to remix and reuse bits of cultural detritus.
All right, cultural detritus. Detritus is like small bits of dead organic material. Now you can kind of think, oh, well, it's like an analogy because this Castaway song was from so long ago that, you know, no one was listening to it or singing it or using it on TikTok that it was dead. Also, it's a very short song, so that's what's a small bit. But I think he just like, I don't know if he had a word of the day that he was trying to work into his video, and detritus was the word, but it actually doesn't really make sense. And I wanted to see if maybe cultural detritus had some sort of like significance, like if other people have been using this and it's some sort of movement or something that I haven't really heard about. And the only thing I saw was there's a like film group called Cultural Detritus, and that's the only example that I've seen of those two words together. So I don't think that really makes sense. There'd be an easier way that he could have put it, surely.
As sweet, dopamine-giving, nostalgia-drenched content.
And then here he's just being hyperbolic, right? It's meant to be kind of funny. So we kind of have this weird juxtaposition of cultural detritus with just like hyperbole, which is kind of strange.
Especially after a year which didn't seem to make any sense. Things didn't really seem to happen for a reason.
Okay, here. So, I mean, this was released in May 2021. So 2020, a year before this, right, is when things started shutting down, COVID protocols. We're now, when this video is posted in 2021, where we're in our second year of COVID protocols. And he says that things didn't happen for a reason. All right, let's listen to that again to make sure I have that exactly right.
Sweet, dopamine-giving, nostalgia-drenched content. Especially after a year which didn't seem to make any sense. Things didn't really seem to happen for a reason.
Things didn't really seem to happen for a reason. Like, what does that mean? Things didn't happen for a reason. What I think he's trying to say is with all the shutdowns and things, there didn't seem to be a reason why we are now in this kind of situation, right? This pandemic basically is unprecedented. He was trying to find a way to say these are unprecedented times without saying these are unprecedented times, which he came up with things didn't really happen for a reason, which again, I think as like a sentence doesn't make any sense because like, well, what reason? And then he goes on. Let's listen a little bit more.
And Castaways, the song, might for some people remind them of a time where things did happen for reasons.
Remind people of a time when things did happen for reasons. He's changed it to a plural, which even further confuses his point. Because before he said things didn't happen for a reason, and now he's saying things did happen for reasons. And it's like, but what reasons? What are the reasons you're talking about? Like, I've been racking my brain about what he actually means here, and it's just so odd. Like I said, I kind of summarized it earlier about how he's saying that basically this really resonates with Gen Z and that's why it's popular. But like the way he's talking about it right now really just doesn't make sense.
Things were safe. Castaways acts as an anesthetizing agent to ward off the trauma of a year that was lost.
Okay, so he very easily, instead of saying anesthetizing, he could have said a numbing agent, right? for the trauma of having to go into COVID shutdown, etc. But again, he's using like all of these kind of more intellectual or academic words when he doesn't have to, which I think kind of is contrary to what the rest of the video presents.
Kind of like the Backyardigans ship.
There you go. Okay, and then the rest of it's just kind of ads. So that concludes my comments about this. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.